think that we can start. So welcome to this second session and the afternoon section of the meeting. We are going to speak this afternoon on the democratic model for sustainability, and then it's a conversation across social and natural sciences. I would like to thank so much the organizer for the organizer of this very, very interesting supranational democracy dialogue meetings, and all the colleagues and all the participants. And particularly, I would like to thank a lot the speakers that are going to contribute to this section, and Emilio Padoschioppa and Saverio Di Benedetto. I will ask Emilio and Saverio if they want to join me, where we, in order of keeping distance for the COVID regulation, we are moving, and two of the panelists will be with me anytime, and then we will change. Francesca Leucci, Francesco Spera, Sara Cavagnero, and Geoffrey Glazius. They are covering different aspects of the social and natural sciences. And then I think that, well, that this dialogue is absolutely a milestone in order to try to achieve sustainability. Sustainability is something that we don't know if it is a concept, a starting point, an end point. It is quite difficult, but there is one thing that when I was considering this discussion today in the afternoon is that absolutely clear. Is that for us as a species is the only solution in order to avoid extinction, to avoid to become a failed mutation. So if I need to say that there is something that you can say absolutely clear in natural selection, is that what has been selected for, what we are going to observe is only what managed to be stable and to stabilize a system for the long period. All other things, whatever has been evolved, that was also fantastic, but bringing instability became a failed mutation, or was bringing a lot of failed mutations. So it's not an opportunity, it's not an option, it's absolutely a must. And then it's a must which is far from being disciplinary. There is not any disciplinarity. It's an equilibrium that is related to almost everything we do. So this kind of discussion, this kind of dialogue across different disciplines, I think is the only way to proceed. And so I'm really happy to be here to try to understand something more together with you. The plan for this roundtable is that the speaker will have 15 minutes. And we will try to keep the time and to be fast in order to leave time for the discussion at the end. Unless you have a burning question that you absolutely need to ask to the speaker, otherwise you don't feel comfortable, then you are ready. Of course, you are free to do that. If you could wait for the end of all the presentation, would be great. And then we are going to have a discussion, hopefully quite a wide discussion. And then the panelists will give us, as a present, their final thinking, a couple of bullet messages that we can bring home, thanking them for their contribution. So in order to avoid to lose my time, I invite Emilio Padoschioppa from the University of Milano Bicocca to open this session.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation and for organizing this meeting. So I am an ecologist, and I will start shortly speaking about ecology and why ecology is concerned about supranational democracy. And in particular, my specialization in ecology is landscape ecology. So the short outline of my talk would be, I spent some words in the role of landscape ecology inside ecological theory, and I will show something about ecological boundaries versus administrative boundaries, because it's something that the landscape ecology studied. And then I will move from landscape ecology to the concept of the Anthropocene. If we look to, this is a complicated history of ecology, and this net, in the small word that you cannot read are the names of ecologists during the time. And the landscape ecology is a quite young part of ecology. Started to give a real contribution to ecology in 70 years, and was really recognized as a subfield of ecology in the 90 years of last century. So it's something quite new. But bring new ideas in ecology. In particular, I want to spend some word on a biological spectrum and emerging properties. And there are other ideas, but obviously we do not have too much time now to discuss. I want to say that it was quite easy in the textbooks of 80 years to find an overlapping concept. So the word ecosystem was used as an ecosystem is and as Tansley explained it, but also as a synonymous of ecological systems. So you can find the idea of ecosystem Earth, ecosystem Taiga, ecosystem Salento, ecosystem Pond, even in some case, ecosystem flower pot or something like that. But we know that biological spectrum has an order, so we can start, and exactly Tansley wrote something about that. He started with atoms, and then molecules, then cells, then organs, organism, population, and community ecosystems, biomes and or ecoregion, biosphere, and landscape are inside this spectrum. So now is more usual finding something biosphere, so this is the Earth, biome, something like a taiga, pluvial forest, and so on. Landscape, the area of Salento can be considered a landscape, or a pond as an ecosystem, as a true ecosystem. And that means that there are spatial and temporal scale, and I want to show you just from the ecological part, so organism, populations, community and ecosystem, then ecoregions or biome and biosphere, and the landscape is exactly here in the middle, and complete the biological spectrum. Recognizing this reality bring to recognize also another property. It's not only a property of landscapes, a property of every system, that is an emerging property. At each level of a biological spectrum, there are emerging properties that cannot be defined by adding up the property of a lower level. A landscape, this is an example of a landscape around Milan, is a mosaic of cornfield, rice field, meadow, ditch, pond, woods, and there are properties for the cornfield, rice field, and for instance, the number of species is a property that that I can measure. At cornfield, rice field, the number of birds and number of reptiles, and then the whole number of species at the landscape is the sum of the part. But the connectivity is something that I cannot explain at ecosystem level. I need to explain at the landscape level, and so on. And this also brings another point quite clear, that ecological boundary of landscapes are not similar to administrative boundary, and can be different. In some cases, they are exactly the same. I show you some picture. Here, probably you can recognize some kind of boundary. And yes, if in Google Earth we ask to draw also the boundary, you will see this line you recognize. This is an administrative boundary between Haiti Republic in the left and the Dominican Republic in the west. And it's quite clear. We recognize the boundary because there is a different management. I can show you another example. Here probably you recognize something because the grain size of the field is different in the lower part of the picture in the upper part. And exactly, yes, here there is a boundary. And the upper part is a Czech Republic, and the other part is Austrian Republic. And this is the result of 50 years of a Soviet regime on Czech Republic. So in some cases, you can, there is a perfect overlapping between ecological boundary and national, in that case, national boundaries. But here, you cannot find absolutely a boundary. This is there is a legal boundary. Is the boundary between Norway and Sweden, but you don't recognize nothing. And the animals, for instance, all the herbivores, they don't recognize this boundary. So we started to study this, this approach using a concept of Richard Foreman, one of the founders of landscape ecology, the idea of urban regions. So some years ago we tried, he say, okay, there is an area of active interaction between a city and its surrounding. And we try to draw the urban region of Milan. Okay, probably I don't need to explain to you where is Milan and the role, the economic role of the town. But I want to show you directly the result. The final result is that the urban region of Milan is 1/3 of Lombardy in the middle, and doesn't care absolutely about administrative boundary. We cover different districts. We reach the town of Brescia. People from Brescia normally is not really happy when we show this result, but that is. And is a landscape totally different from the northern part, where forests are the large matrix of landscape, and southern part, where agricultural areas, lands are the larger part. In the middle, there is a mosaic of town, fields, and so on. And here is shown during the time how this urban region expanded. And I must say that in European legislation, in some cases, this approach was accepted. Water Framework Directive, to give an example, recognize that the ecological reality for a river cannot consider national boundaries. And so, in the last 5 minutes, more or less, I try to move from landscape ecology to the Anthropocene. Anthropocene is the new geological epoch, where the human run the world in every way. And people who speak about that recognize that the long history of the Earth is an history of interacting systems. We started maybe in a simpler way, lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere were interacting and changing each other. Then there were a chemosphere that became a biosphere, and inside a biosphere, we observed something that now is Homo sapiens that run the world. And this reality was well explained by Paul Crutzen, a Nobel Prize for Chemistry, that little more than 20 years ago used this word Anthropocene and say, okay, it's quite clear that we have a control on the systems of the Earth. There are examples about that. This is, I'm afraid it's in Italian, but it's a study of Stockholm Resilience Institute that show that the condition of the Earth now are different from the past. This other is quite well known, is the carbon dioxide reconstructed in the past, also in the past longer than Homo sapiens, but we see that now we are on the arrow on the top right, so in a totally different situation. And just a last example, our footprint on biodiversity. I want to also, this is a study coming from Israel, and it's quite impressive. It was an evaluation of, for instance, of the biomass of terrestrial mammals. And the 96% of biomass of terrestrial mammals is linked to us, or domesticated animals, or us, and only the 4% are wild mammals, wild terrestrial mammals. So, some conclusion. Certainly, in this new epoch, there will be a new geopolitical led by population numbers and by ecological transition. And in both cases, I must say, as a European country, if we remain alone, we become totally irrelevant in the world. This is the projection when we will be 10 billions, and we see that country in Africa have more inhabitants than the whole Europe altogether. But also, let's say, for here is a map with now, in the, let's say, at the end of the 20th century, the country that have more natural gas, and if we do this ecological transition, a new geopolitics will arise. We need rare minerals, and those are countries that have really rare minerals, so something totally different from now. Then it was very well said this morning, there is no planet B. So all environmental problems of the Anthropocene can't be solved at a national level, and this is quite clear. Once again, I want to show this is another important result of a Stockholm Resilience Institute. They show the boundary of Earth system, and there are 9 ecological problems, quite clear. All of them, they need a supranational solution. Finally, I want just to conclude with something provocative. And let me say, I call this a Rari Hypothesis. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Yuval Harari, the Israel historian, but he tried to explain quite well why we run the world, and he started with this idea. 70,000 years ago, we were insignificant apes in some corner of Africa. We care just about our things in Africa, and we have an impact on the Earth quite similar to yellowfish or sharks or tigers or something like that. Now something's changed, definitely, but why? You say probably because we are able to cooperate in very large number, in very flexible way. Some insects are able to cooperate in large numbers, but they are not flexible. Other mammals, they are flexible, like chimpanzee, but they don't cooperate in large number. They need to know each other, otherwise you cannot cooperate. And the only species that really can do both things are human. And why? You say probably because for our imagination, we can create history, and we believe to history. I say the most successful history is a dollar bill, the money. If everyone believes that $1 bills okay, is worthy of 10 bananas. This works, but with chimpanzee this doesn't work. And he say, and I think he's quite convinced also God's nation are such kind of history. So nation is a good history in that we believe, and maybe we can become a better storytellers than nation state or something like this. Okay, thanks for your.
Thank you so much, Emilio, for this great overview of our ecological context where we live, and also for giving us suggestions that other species can give us in order how to perform better in the future. So thank you really so much. And then I will move, and I'm inviting Saverio Di Benedetto to take the floor and give his talk. I'm going to move anyway and be back.
Thank you very much, Alberto. And also thank you very much to Professor Padoa-Schioppa for his presentation, because it allows me to continue a sort of discourse, precisely moving from the essence of the speech of the professor concerning the main basis of ecology, and in particular the concept of ecosystem. In fact, this section is called Democratic Models for Sustainability, and sustainability is essentially related to the idea to maintain ecological equilibria, to maintain ecological systems, both at a local and at a global level. And in this sense, it's rather different from sustainable development, because from a legal point of view, sustainable development is rather the generic idea to balance and to reconcile economics, ecologics, and human rights fields. Conversely, the idea of sustainability is precisely to consider the time factor and ecological equilibria in defining new and further models of evolution, new further models of human organization. And as a matter of fact, the question of democratic models is actually our topics, is essentially a question of, is a matter of normative models, of legal models. So it's a problem how humans organize their society, but the organization of a society means and involves normative models, the existence of rules. So what about my presentation, these models of creating rules, so democratic models, creation of rules and participation of people with respect to the ecological model? First of all, when we discuss about democratic models, as we do here, under a discourse about supranational democracy, our basic idea is to think about models overcoming the national, state-based, Westphalian models. Is the idea to say, well, there is the state, we should look for something different. And that's true, and that's correct. I would like to follow this path, but trying to propose my proposal, my suggestion concerning this perspective. I will organize my discourse on 3 points. First point, the classical model, the state-based model. Second point, the potential supranational model, non-Westphalian, non-state. Third model, a sort of integrated sovereign model, which reconcile the global level and the local level. It could seem simplistic. I would try to show that, in fact, perhaps it could be work. Well, first model, you know, the state model is centralized, is based on systems of decisions which may be based on a democratic process or non-democratic process. Anyway, it's based on law, it's based on a division of the earth between different centers of competence. More or less 195 states on the earth, each of them having sovereignty, each of them deciding its own politics, its own laws, its own legal systems. This state-centered society, which characterized Earth since 5 centuries, more or less, involves also the existence of another legal order, which is international law. I am professor of international law. And so, a particular law trying to regulate states when states maintain sovereignty, so the possibility to decide. This is the very complex equilibrium between international law and states. On the one hand, obligations on states. On the other hand, states remain sovereign without nothing above them. Superiorem non recognoscentes, according to 5 centuries ago definition of states at the beginning of our modern era of national state. The absence of, the lack of a unitary authority over the states. The great dilemma of Kelsen, trying to find a Grundnorm which does not exist at the international level, at the global level. This is our first model. So, national legal system and international law complexively expresses legal models revolve around sovereignty. Sovereignty is the pillar. And when international law, this is the final point, very important, a further point. When international law try to protect ecological systems, so try to create international legal rules and standards saying to states, you have to avoid this or the other one, you have to do in this way, there is a conflict. Why? Because ecological equilibria involve the 70, the 80% of national policies. Industry, agriculture, energy, urban planning. It's easier to say what is not involved by ecological balances. Administration of justice, education, perhaps. So, in a nutshell, the existence of too much international legal rules concerning environmental protection means to sharply reduce national sovereignty. So it's intrinsically against the current structure of the earth from a political point of view. This is the key point, this is the dilemma, this is the problem. And this is the reason for which, in my opinion, it's so difficult to effectively create international legal rules concerning the environment. Because if they are too much precise, they conflict with sovereignty. They conflict with jealous of states. My reasoning is not it's better in a way or in another way, at least for this moment. It's just a sort of a photograph of a picture, of the current situation of the world. First model, so state model, international law model, and the difficulty for international law to enter within a specific ecological problem, which are, as Professor Padoa-Schioppa explains, the ecosystem-based is precisely at a local level. At a general level, is a biosphere. And then he said ecoregion, and then landscape. The real nutshell, the real brick of the wall, the complexive wall, is at the local level. This is, I think, a very important point, and I will come on this. Second point, of course, it's possible to propose a supranational direction. And this is a good perspective, of course. In particular, a perspective involving an open global society, a growing role on non-governmental entities, and in particular, the idea that there exists a cosmopolitan community of scientists. The idea that biologists, ecologists, and so on, collaborate each other from another part to another part of the world, throughout the world. This is true, of course, and this is a way to create good governance and good model of behavior for human communities, so for human societies. But at the end of the day, it remains the great dilemma of sovereignty. What about sovereignty? Of course, these cosmopolitan technician standards may influence sovereignty, and may create rules on sovereignty. My opinion is that if we try to create general mechanisms, in particular at the international level, creating very big system producing rules at the world level, this is important, for instance, for climate change, but this is not enough. This is not enough for two reasons. First of all, sovereignty exists and resists with respect to the risk to lose the 80% of its own competence. First point. Second point, ecosystems. The most part, a broad part, an important part of the ecological discourse and ecological conservation and protection is made at the local level, is a composition of radically unitary ecosystems, which are, on the one hand, interrelated, but on the other hand, autonomous in themselves. So it's not so easy to always create, at the global level, rules concerning the protection of all the concrete reality, even because in each ecosystem situation, there exist different human communities with their tradition, their culture, their pluralism. Then the third perspective. The third perspective is not to combat sovereignty, is not to destroy sovereignty, is rather the idea to influence sovereign, and in particular to arrive to determine the exercise of sovereignty. Not to create a general obligation or general obligation determining precisely each behavior of state. Of course, it is possible in some fields, for instance, emissions of greenhouse gases. For this is possible to create global standards. So of course, it's a very good way. But it's not the only way to realize ecological protection. A risk of the current discourse on climate change is to reduce all the ecological threshold and all the ecological equilibria to climate change. Climate change is just one among 6, 7, 8 thresholds, very important and very at risk at the global level. I think that perhaps Professor Bass and Professor Paolo Schioppa may correct or explain this point. But anyway, there is a study on Science in 2015 identifying 7 or 8 ecological thresholds. Just one of these is climate change. Another one is biodiversity. Another one is the freshwater system, and so on. So, for, in particular, the ecosystem perspective, it is important also to provide for a local perspective, but how to influence many thousands of different local perspectives. From a legal point of view, from a model of democracy, the perspective is precisely to affirm that, and I tried to do this in a work I wrote, is the idea to say sovereignty is not sharply limited by international obligation, but is influenced by international law. There is a goal for sovereignty, and a fundamental goal for sovereignty is to maintain ecological equilibria which are necessary for Earth life. This means that the concrete exercise of sovereignty prerogatives in terms of administrative procedure, in terms of judicial procedure, in terms of access of non-governmental organization to legal stand is a way to allow in the concrete exercise of sovereignty, the presence of local community, of rural community, of indigenous population, of group of scientists which are placed in Amazonia, are placed in Savannah, are placed in Indonesia, and may concretely determine which are the measure, the legal determination necessary for concrete ecosystem, for concrete tradition of population. So, general influence created by standards, by common global standard, but concrete legal action based on an idea to influence sovereignty and to determine and to allow concrete women and men to enter into the legal decisions and to decide by applying this general principle in the concrete case according to their own competence and traditions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saverio. That was really fascinating, this discussion on the different models of democracy that we can apply and how they match with the ecosystem dynamics and with the functioning and the sustainability. I think it will be also part of the discussion at the end of this first round of presentation. So thank you so much. Then I will ask if you could leave the floor to Francesca Leucci and Francesco Spera to join me on the table. And then I will give the floor to Francesca for a presentation.
Noi abbiamo la stessa presentazione.
Okay.
Quindi ci mettiamo lì perché abbiamo le slide.
That is fantastic. So, okay. So you will have 2 slots. Okay, then it's fine. Bit of entropy is always creating the discussion, and then you produce entropy at the end.
Ah, fai così.
Yes.
Ok. Comincia tu, comincio io.
Si vede? Si vede.
Si vede, si vede.
Ma puoi cominciare con
Vado?
l'inizio? Vai.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming, for your time, and for the inspiring inputs. So today, me and Francesca, friend and colleague, we are presenting a very peculiar and specific piece of international law legislation and instruments that can contribute to a global, omnilateral building of global society, and that we discuss that can be the soft law. Soft law, as you may know or not, is just one of the instruments deployed by regional organizations, states, in international law. Is an instrument born in international law. Some may say it's not law at all, some say it's law. We'll discuss about that. And in this panel and under this framework, we'll just present an example and a case law that is related actually to, try to relate to biology, but in the sense of political biology and pursuing of political biological goal, so preserving water in India, and then we discussed the fact that the use of these instruments by international or regional or national actors can enhance a sort of new global action for pursuing and in pursuing global goals such as environmental protection. So as you may see, in this presentation we talk about European law, because the instrument we are going to address is an instrument adopted by the European law and the third states. Not talking about EU law too much. We are in the sphere and the area of EU external relation law, and these instruments that come from international law has been often and recently in the past decades been deployed and used by international, by European law and the external action, and for different purpose, and for the issue we have it here is for international environmental protection. So going very fast on what is soft law, it comes, I say, from international law. It more or less is the discussion and the theory upon the soft law is based on the two, so to say, front lines. One is the fact that the absolute element theory, that this instrument that doesn't really implicates any kind of legal term, so it's not law at all. The other theory that we embraced, and not just me as a PhD candidate, but the European law doctrine, is the doctrine on the indirect legal effect, so this relative theory, where soft law is not binding, but it produces somehow a sort of practical effect. And if we skip very much, so you can see here from different doctrine, like from 1994 until 2015, the EU law doctrine has embraced the theory of the relative theory of soft law. So soft law is an instrument that has some practical effect, after all. No, there's two pieces. And soft law, okay, this is, this instrument falls within, just to give a focus on this instrument, it falls within the category of memorandum of understanding, joint declaration, joint statement, code of conduct. So those are the essential elements, not binding, adopted by EU and third countries, supplement, interpret, and implement hard law, so in binding instruments.
So now we move to the advantages of using soft law. And actually we show you how we combined a double approach to the topic. So we merged actually the legal perspective with the economic perspective. And we actually came up with 6 possible reasons for which we can use soft law in external relations at least, but of course this can be also enlarged to other domains. So first of all, I will bring the three main theories for which we can use soft law based on the economic perspective. Just a short introduction. The economic analysis of law has not been explored so much, explored so much the domain of international law. There is much controversy on that in the economic analysis, in the economic scholarship. But in the economic analysis can actually show or can be useful, for example, to determine which institution should be better placed to achieve the certain goals at the international level. And moreover, the economic analysis of law can be useful also in international law, because we can imagine that the relationships between or among states can be seen actually as relationships that create externalities on other states. So from this point of view, of course, the economic analysis of law can actually show or understand, try to understand how we can actually make externalities back or redress externalities back to the states that created these externalities. There are main reasons. There are many reasons for which hard law is really wealth maximizing, let's say, from an economic perspective. So it should be more helpful if we want to maximize the wealth of the states. But there are also a few scholars that stress the role of soft law also for as instruments which are more economically efficient. First of all, if we see the relationships between or among states as a coordination game, for example, soft law can be justified in terms of economics or economical efficiency because actually is a kind of coordinating device. This theory means that we don't really need hard laws between the states when there are already reasons for which the relationships between the states work as a coordinating game. From this point of view, there are already reasons for which compliance can be achieved between the states. And there is no need to embark on hard laws procedures, so especially to adopt hard laws, which is, of course, from an economic perspective, much more expensive compared to soft law adoption. Then there is another theory for which soft laws are efficient, and this is the loss avoidance theory. So what does it mean? Loss avoidance actually means that we can imagine that states decide whether to adopt a soft law or a hard law based on the expected gains and losses from the agreement. So if I expect expected gains and losses depend on the consequences of the violation of hard laws. So if I expect that this agreement will be actually respected by the other party, and I don't have a specific fear of violation, then of course I don't really need to adopt a hard law instrument. So in this balance between expected gains and benefits, then of course soft laws can be more efficient from this point of view. Of course the discourse should be much longer, but we need to run to go fast to our example. There is also a third theory for which soft laws are meaningful, and this is the delegation theory that relies on the need of a flexible instrument. So if I adopt a hard law instrument, of course, this means that if I want to change hard law, then I need to undergo very long and expensive procedures. So from this point of view, if I want a flexible instrument, delegation theory actually supports the idea of soft law. There are also legal reasons for which soft law can be preferred, and this is the idea that we want to have a smoother negotiation and conclusions, so this relates to the decision making. Moreover, the soft law is more suitable to politically sensitive matters, and as we already said, it actually allows to adopt more flexible commitments. The disadvantages of soft laws, again, from a legal perspective and the economic perspective. From a legal perspective, we have the risk of stepping outside the legal framework, challenging the protection and the promotion of EU constitutional principles and administrative law. This will be clearer now that we go into the example. Also, there is this risk of violation of the principle of conferral, the principle of preemption, institutional balance, sincere cooperation, the rule of law. Of course, the violation of democratic control and accountability. And again, on the balance between the different powers, there can be a kind of violation of the role of the parliament, the role of the court, and we'll see that in our example. Of course, there may be also disadvantages from an economic perspective, which relates to the costs of violation that might be underestimated. And now we move to our example.
No, yes. Like we will not go through the whole legal aspects because of time given, but we'll try to explain how this instrument might work or it works and which legal question might pose to at least a EU legal perspective, because from soft law is motivated the theory that, and this is also discussed in our paper, these instruments were regrouped in three type of functional aspects. So one is pre-law, so it means that they are the basis that forms part of hard law agreements. Post-law, so like the classical use of soft law to interpret hard law, and para-law is the bilateral soft law instrument that represent an alternative. We will see that so the question that we are asking this paper we discuss, and the legal question in India-EU water partnership that is a joint declaration is what are the legal and economic implication, and whether they achieve, let's say, in order to achieve the same economical or environmental goals via soft law, they probably might bypass some legal constitutional guaranteed rights, and that is so yeah, this is the context, but we can also skip because we have no time for that. But anyway, this was a joint declaration by India, European Union, that created the base. The soft law instrument is a joint declaration, but this soft law instrument creates the base of an Indo-European water partnership. So that has the aim to promote, sustain, and tackle the climate change and environmental crisis in India. So the fact that we discuss is that joint declaration, as each soft law instrument, state that is not intending to create legal obligation. This is why those instruments are called soft. It creates, however, and in the instrument is clear, so in joint declaration state that it creates anyway substantive commitment, and this is why the joint declaration, even though it's not binding, it was used as a foundation legal base for the action document for India-EU water partnership. According to the case law, on few case law of soft law, external soft law by the EU Court of Justice, normally the agreement may constitute treaties regardless of their form and designation. So the form of soft or bilateral law is irrelevant. The intention of the parties in the European legal order became a fundamental element, and EU principles are applied. It means that you have to apply EU law, and at least the constitutional principles. In fact, this instrument, the joint declaration, falls into the category of political commitments. So meaning that the party, and this is stated in the quote, we quote the fact, this is stated that the party is committed to work towards the establishment. So the international law, European law, language is important. So committed to work towards the establishment of the India-EU water partnerships. So what we discuss and what we address is the fact that after the joint declaration, that has created the India-European Water Partnership to achieve so an important goal, and then it's not just an important goal, it means EU money going to India. They might have used probably as a basis to create this India-European Water Partnership a regulation 2014, because it's very similar, this joint declaration and this Indo-European Water Partnership to the regulation 2014 for a lot of reasons, such as, I will give just some example, that the 2014 regulation is also mentioned at the basis of the adoption of the action document of the India Water Partnership. It's also the content, the objective and the aims of this instrument is part of the EU-India Strategic Partnership. Among whose commitment it is possible to find a scale-up cooperation on water management. And moreover, you have a lot of reference to the 2014 regulations. However, the basis was not the 2014 regulation, but this joint, not binding instrument. So this is why we ask briefly whether the Commission is competent to adopt a political commitment such as the joint declaration, based on the fact that most of the time these soft instruments quote that the Commission employed the Article 17 of TEU, that is the general representation of the Commission abroad. But the Commission always used the argument stated in a vademecum that the mandate of the Article 17 is precise enough, but there is a problem. And the fact that, for instance, for concluding in the external relation like a sort of binding instrument, you need to inform, even for a non-binding instrument according to case law. However, in the joint declaration, it's only stated that the Council is being informed. Is it enough? The Commission has the competence for this? We don't know. It's just a question.
So, besides these legal...
Okay, grazie.
Just 2 minutes. Besides these legal challenges, we actually went into the economic underpinnings of this soft law instrument, the EU Water Partnership. And probably if we draw on this economic scholarship on the use of soft law, we might see that the partnership can be justified based on the loss avoidance theory. So in a way, the joint declaration seems to be up to ensure reciprocity and self-enforcement. Incentives of compliance are likely to remain constant in the future. Why is that? Well, on one hand, the partnership was born or was made because actually has been made because actually Indian authorities need to learn from the expertise of the European Union in the water management, and this can be found in many documents that actually talk about, discuss the need of this partnership. On the other hand, we can actually speculate on the fact that the European Union probably will have very few incentives to violate this agreement. Why? Because actually there is a big reputational loss that would represent a big reputational loss for the European Union, not just towards the Indian partnership, but also because normally these external relations concerning the environment are also part of the European Union Green Deal. So actually it's very unlikely that the European Union will violate this agreement. On the other hand, there are also the delegation theory maybe can justify the use of the agreement because, well, this is because if we think of the future, water management is strictly depending on the conditions of the environment, the climate crisis. So probably there is a need for an instrument that actually can be renegotiated at very low costs in the future. And from this point of view, soft law is better. Lastly, the coordinating device, of course, we can also find reasons for which the joint declaration belongs to the category of political commitments with a preparatory purpose for future agreements. So again, embarking in a very long procedure to adopt hard laws maybe is not really needed from this point of view. In conclusion, under all scholarly interpretations of rationales for employing soft laws, probably the objectives of the joint declaration between EU and India seem to be achievable through soft laws rather than hard laws at lower costs. And we can conclude, actually, okay, we leave this for the very end of the presentation. Okay, just to make a recap in the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your joint presentation and also bringing us then into an applied case and then entering the different type of normative instrument that we can use in order to go on. Then see you have done. I will ask you to go back to your place. Thank you so much. And I'm going to invite to join me Sara Cavagnero and Jeffrey Glasius for their presentation. Jeffrey, if you want to join me, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are keeping the time, and then we are also getting a lot of very interesting input from the different panelists. So I'm leaving Sarah taking the floor.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me here again. I'm very much thrilled of being here after 4 years because, you know, I participated to the first edition of the Supranational Democracy Dialogue, and back then I hadn't even started my PhD journey, but I'm driven by the very same question: what am I going to wear for the conference? So I'm trying to provide an answer to this question, provided that I want to wear sustainably, and it's quite difficult to find an answer which is comprehensive and clear to this question, which is apparently so simple. As I'm an IP lawyer, intellectual property lawyer, I search for the answer within my discipline. So today I'm trying to explain how and if intellectual property can actually drive sustainability and foster sustainability or not. Why IP? So first of all, when it comes to sustainability, one of the first things we are looking for is information, right? So we are trying to understand how our clothes were made, how the workers were treated, which kind of impact the production had. And in a word, we're looking for transparency, transparent information. IPRs, so trademarks in particular, are able to play such a role because they provide information both to consumers and within the different players involved in the supply chain. For instance, here you have a screenshot of the People3 page. People3 is one of the most renowned brands. It's an English one. It's been created more than 10 years ago when sustainability in fashion wasn't such a big thing. And, well, it's quite small, but they have several sustainability claims which are supported by the things I circled in black, which are certification marks. In particular, these two, the Soil Organic Association and the Warfare Trade Association, refer to the impact of the water impact and the treatment of the workers. But these are just two of the over 300 certifications marks that exist in the world and apply to the field of fashion only. What are certification marks? They're basically marks that can be used by entities that are different from the owner. And the owners of the certification marks are generally NGOs or companies, private companies. The very central one, the GOTS, which is the most used certification marks in fashion, is owned by a private company, an American one. The Fair Wear Association one, that is also quite famous, the Fair Trade, sorry, is owned by an NGO. On the very left, you have the EU Ecolabel, that is run and administered by the European institution. So a wide variety of certification marks which cover different aspects of the supply chain and different aspects of the production of our clothes. Another example here is the Harris tweed. Harris tweed has been registered as a certification mark according to the UK law since 1909. So it's been more than 100 years. yeah, quite old. And it's now registered in the EU, so at the EU IP office, as a collective mark. Why? Because according to the EU regulation, certification marks cannot cover the geographical origin of products, while collective marks can. So according to the English law, it is a certification mark. According to the EU law, it's a collective mark. Oops, sorry. Finally, third type of mark, individual one. So Patagonia, well known for being a very sustainable fashion company, well, they register their mission, we're in business to save our home planet, as a trademark. Here, again, it's a screenshot of the EU office. And basically, they embedded in a trademark their mission, their willingness to shape the planet through their production methods. So as a result of my empirical observation and the scoping studies I conducted, I understood, first of all, that there is a wide and uncoordinated variety of institutional contexts that are composed of both public and private actors. They are competing, sharing, and performing governance functions. Both the three aspects are true, and depending on the institutions that come into play, interact differently. Second aspect that struck me was basically the failure of transnational law. So basically, there's a lack of harmonized rules and a lack of shared definitions on what represents sustainability in the fashion industry. And this is particularly problematic in this field because production is geographically dispersed and changes are market-driven. So within a globalized industry, there's a lack of globalized rules. Third point, greenwashing. Of course, against this background, greenwashing is increasing, is rising as a phenomenon. But what is happening is that now institutions at European level, also local level, national level, and international one are starting to tackle this phenomenon, but they're not covering IPRs at all. So if you look also at the newest proposals of the European Union, the EU textile strategy, they want to counter greenwashing, but they don't mention IPRs and trademarks at all, even if they play such an important role for sustainability. Fourth element, the need to reconcile theories pertaining to different streams. So looking at legal solutions only is not enough. There's a need to resort to sustainability governance studies, to fashion theories as well, in order to address this problem, which is called the wicked one. Because it's so complicated, there are so many issues that interact that one discipline only isn't enough. So I came up with 4 research questions. So why are industry players resorting to intellectual property law to convey sustainability in fashion? The second, which factors need to be considered when assessing the effectiveness of IPRs as assets for sustainability? And what does undermine their effectiveness? And finally, an issue for discussion today is which principle should inspire public and private regulators when resorting to IPRs for governing sustainability in fashion. Well, I conducted, to answer these questions, an integrative literature review and found 127 articles that I assessed and analyzed. The number is growing because the topic is becoming more and more important. So in a year, I added to my literature review 9 articles, so now I have 136 that I try to put in this concept matrix in order to have a general overview and try to understand. And so I would like to share with you the answers to at least a trial of answering to these questions. So why IPRs? The answer can be found in the product labeling for product quality regulation that has been enacted since the late 70s in Europe and led, first of all, to the development of a certification mark in Germany, the so-called Blue Angel, in 1968, which is the first certification mark that has been adopted in Europe. Why IPRs? Why a certification mark? Because marks are able to perform the so-called trust function, meaning the opportunity to reveal the so-called credence attributes. There are features of a product that cannot be experienced directly by a consumer, but are key to inform their choices in the market. So I don't know how this jumper was made, but reading the certification that ensures me that it was produced by workers treated fairly, I decide to buy this particular jumper, not another one. How can I verify whether this information is true or not? Professor Chon came to the suggestion of using the so-called tracer marks that combine IP law with new technologies. For instance, scanning a QR code that is embedded in the mark, you can reach and find all this information and validate them through videos or other information that are available on the internet. Another problem is the transparency that we mentioned at the beginning. And so a branch of literature is devoted to this topic that has been framed under the governance by disclosure title, let's say. But there is a big problem. What are we disclosing? What are companies disclosing? So this branch of scholars came to the conclusion that we need public intervention. We need public regulators. It's not enough to leave the market players alone, because otherwise they will cherry pick the issues that are more convenient for them, neglecting those that are not important, or the areas where they're not performing well. Which factors do we need to consider when we assess the effectiveness of IPRs? Sorry, there are a lot of factors, and it's small. Many of them overlap with other interventions that have been made today. The first two recall me of Wolfgang's intervention earlier. First, institutional design and the politics of global standard settings, because we have the market players and the brands are really shaping regulation. They're really becoming regulators themselves at supranational level, because in many cases they are multinational corporations. Second, fragmentation and interaction. So there is an overlap across multiple regimes. There are power dynamics that come into play, and these power dynamics are frequently against the law. For instance, there are systematic violations of contract law when it comes to workers' rights, but nobody resorts to legal remedies in order to do something against this violation. Otherwise, for instance, if you're a supplier, you would lose the job the next year if you resort to the legal remedies that you have under contract law. So these have been theorized as anti-innovation norms, because they go against the available legal framework. Another issue is the so-called governance by measurement. So basically, these certification marks and marks in general are based on rules that have been defined either by public or private regulators, and they are monitored according to precise indicators. Those indicators are generally science-based, and they're quite difficult to understand, and quite difficult to read, even if you're studying this subject. So in several cases, you have to resort to scientists in order to understand the indicators, waste a lot of time, and involve non-legal professionals that actually shape the rules. Another issue is that those indicators, again, have to transform a complex reality and translate it into numbers. So they will obviously select some issues and neglect others. Finally, there's a lack of enforcement mechanism. So if you're violating the rules that stand behind the certification or collective mark, you won't be allowed to use that mark anymore. But that's it. There's nothing more you can do. And you, as a consumer, have no power to enforce any remedy in case of violation. So beside these critical aspects, there are other issues that undermine the effectiveness of IPRs as regulators for sustainability governance. The issue covered, because none of the marks we've seen, neither the public or the private ones, cover all aspects regarding the life cycle. They focus on the transnational dimension only. So there is no emergence of a supranational trademark regime. So they're still very much bound to the European, American, national context. There are no shared rules at supranational level, and there is no cross-sector collaboration. So what we've learned from other fields, such as food, where these standards have been used for several years, is not shared with the fashion industry. So going very quickly on the potential solutions that can be adopted. First of all, for me it's clear that the current system is not working and needs to be reshaped. So we have to be aware of the challenges and limitations of transnational private governance and look at the supranational dimension. The other point is that we need to turn governance studies local. We have to stop thinking at global level in fashion. We have to stop thinking about multinational companies and try to understand how these standards embedded in IP assets are applied at local level and interact with local players. These studies have been categorized under the grounding theories scholarship, but are not applied to the fashion dimension yet. And this leads me to the third point, which is the representation of small players. They are not considered at all by institutions, neither at national or regional level. And finally, the multiple stakeholders perspective, so different players need to be heard. And how? Again, the issue of legitimacy, the issue of participatory and consensus-based procedures, and which stakeholders have to be involved. So these are open questions, and I'm happy to discuss with you about potential solutions that I have on my last slide that I can leave for the discussion later. Thank you very much.
You are bringing us into the market and then see how intellectual property right can then deal with connecting the market with sustainability. So that is really great. Thank you so much. And then I'm giving the floor to Jeffrey for your presentation.
Okay. I wish to say I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you very much to Susanna for inviting me, because I think this is a subject which we have to deal with in our time. And as Susanna said, the war in Ukraine at the moment is catching all the attention of the world, and the most... and rightly so, because this is an event which could have unknown consequences. But this also emphasizes the need for new solutions. I think when the world is stable, when things are going on, nobody's going to make large changes. The status quo will carry on. The earthquakes, if you like, the tremors, the wars, these are the things which will provide the impetus for the world to look seriously at new structures, new ideas. I think if you look historically as well, both the United Nations and the European Union were established as lessons learned from previous wars, and I think, and I hope that something positive will come out of the present war and whatever. I was pleased to get this invitation to Brindisi as well. It's a historic place with a long history. Even my father had heard of Brindisi. He said Hannibal tried to invade here. It's got a long history. And I think the world carries on places, the challenges of different ages are new, and maybe we should make some more history in Brindisi. Why not? Okay, I will say something about myself. I'm originally from England, and now I live in Israel. I work in the field of computer programming, but that's not what has brought me here. I've always had an interest in political, ethical, constitutional matters since I was very young. Maybe there were a number of factors which provided some impetus for that. Well, I grew up in London, and in London, certainly at the time I was growing up, the nuclear issue was commanded a lot of public attention, protests, demonstrations. There was a feeling that London was targeted disproportionately, seeing as the UK was a close ally of the US, and as Russia had a lot of bombs which couldn't actually reach the United States, a lot of them were targeted on England and London, and this caused a lot of public discomfort. Maybe now other issues have commanded public interest. But I think the war in Ukraine must also reawaken renewed thoughts about the nuclear issue. The fact of the matter is we can talk about democracy from now till whenever. The current status where basically a few people could basically end the world as it is and take away the human rights of everyone to life is plainly unsustainable, plainly contrary to any concept of democracy. The very nature of nuclear weapons, which could be set off in a few minutes without even oversight of a national parliament, let alone an international one, is something that is obviously unsustainable. Something we can't just think, well, it's gone on for this long, we can carry on and say everything will be okay. I think we have to think about this as well in the context of changes needed. Okay, this is one thing which I think may have influenced my outlook or my interest in matters of politics and ethics and so on. Probably another factor that provided some background was the family history. My father came originally from Hungary till the age of 10. He had a fairly happy childhood till in the events of World War I, his family was broken up. He was sent with his mother to a hard labor camp, and after that to a concentration camp. So, which he barely survived, just about. So, this history certainly impressed on me that stability might be deceptive. You can have a fairly stable situation at one time, but you cannot be sure that this will continue. Okay, so as I said, I work in programming basically, but I have an interest in the world of ideas, in the world of politics. A few years ago, I started a blog with some of my ideas called Pax Orbis, which I choose this name because if you talk about peace, this sounds incredibly naive. But in Latin, maybe it sounds a bit more classical. So that's how I got to that name. And writing about various ideas, various global problems, various solutions. So this is also how I got the connection with Susanna, because there's some dealing with some similar issues. Anyway, so one of the questions which I did ask was the issue of global warming. This is so incredibly really that this problem has been known about for decades, and the solutions are also in broad known. The world is emitting far too much greenhouse gases. The way to stop this is to stop emitting greenhouse gases on the scale and to preserve also the sinks of carbon dioxide. This is not rocket science. This is not something which you have to get a PhD to understand what is needed to be done. Even so the world has collectively failed to take action, certainly on the scale that is needed and on the time scale that is needed. So why is that? Well, you can write about things on papers, but this led me to some extent to get involved in the subject in Israel and to join various environmental groups who are trying to write a paper, and to write position papers and to persuade government to take this issue more seriously. So one can, there are many facets to this issue. But I would like to talk about one thing in particular, and this connects with some things that have been said previously, which is the subject of a carbon tax. The reason that I emphasize this issue is because the opinion of many economists is that this is the most effective tool for changing people's behavior. A lot of people are price sensitive, and even if they have the money, they don't like to put it out. Companies are virtually forced to act according to economic criteria. If government puts out tender for this, that, or the other service, the cheapest one normally is the one that is selected. So companies are forced to lower their prices. And this means that if one company can make something cheaper by using polluting sources, they have to do it, otherwise they will go out of business. So a carbon tax is an obvious solution to this. Taxes in general have been used to alter people's behavior since time immemorial. One way or the other, this is not some newfangled idea. This is tried and tested methods for getting people to change their way of doing things. There's even an example recently in Israel. They placed a small tax on one-time plastic cutlery and utensils and things like that to reduce the amount of waste. And the usage of these one-time materials went down 50% in a month or two. So we know that economic measures work. We know they're quite simple to implement. So carbon tax is an obvious method for changing people's behavior and forcing or pushing and pulling various companies to reduce their emissions or increase the amount of, well, basically to reduce the emissions. Or it could also be used to encourage the extraction of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So there are basically two elements to a carbon tax. You have to decide how much, and then you have to actually implement it. So the Israeli Ministry of Environment has put out positions about the external costs of various pollutants, including carbon dioxide. Now, in the past, well, actually, to calculate the external cost is not a simple matter. Certainly for a relatively small country, so the Israeli Ministry of Environment has never had pretensions to actually calculate this value themselves. But for a number of years, they said, well, there is a certain value which is used in Europe. There's a certain value which is used in America. As we don't really know, we'll take the middle. Yes, we'll go with half-half. And we'll use that as a calculation of the external cost of carbon dioxide. A few years ago, about 2 years ago, I think, they had a look at the figures again, and well, they said, well, the value used in Europe has gone up quite a lot, and if we take half, we'll have to go up quite a lot here as well. So have a better idea, we'll adopt the American value as the value for Israeli usage. There was a slight problem that actually the Americans had, in the meantime, Trump had become president. But, well, they didn't go with Trump's value because that would have been really ridiculous. But they went with the value from the Environmental Protection Agency of America before Trump got elected, even though actually this was not really valid anymore because Trump had invalidated it. But still, they wouldn't go that far as to go along with Trump. Okay, so the Israeli Environment Agency selected the value of the USA in the Obama era. That is for the calculation of the environmental cost of carbon dioxide. However, that is just a value. In order to change people's behavior, you have to translate that into a tax. Well, Israel to this day doesn't have a carbon tax, but there have been discussions there's been discussions lately about placing some sort of tax on some emissions, but not others. And even these have not actually been implemented. But there are discussions at the moment of a tax, selective tax, on some pollutants, coal, for instance, but not others. Gas, for instance, or a very low level on gas, which to some extent, or to a considerable extent, turns this whole measure to be largely ineffective, as natural gas is expected to be the principal source of emissions from Israel, especially from the electricity sector, which is responsible at the moment for about half of the greenhouse gases from Israel. I'm bringing all this not to say anything specifically about Israel. I think Israel is representative of a lot of countries which don't have the either the knowledge or the resources or the will to actually act seriously on this issue. And there is this claim which is brought quite a lot. Well, our emissions are only about 0.5% or less of the world's global emissions. So what difference does it really make how much how seriously we invest in this issue? What really matters is what the big boys do. So, and I think one of the problems with this issue is that virtually any country, or if you can divide it up into region, is only less than 0.5%, so it doesn't matter. If you don't have concerted action, then you're not going to get anywhere, which correlates with the issue of multinational coordinated action rather than just relying on individual states. I will say about this issue of carbon tax, because it's also very relevant to Europe. One of the factors which is pushing the Israeli government or whatever to implement a carbon tax is the European declaration in green policy documents that Europe will put a boundary tax on countries which do not implement measures to reduce their emissions. This is a factor in all the discussions behind the scenes, but what some people are saying, this is not official policy, but this is in practice, the voices that are heard is that, okay, when Europe puts a border tax on, then we will implement a carbon tax here, and until then, we can continue discussions. I think this does emphasize why concerted action is imperative, and I think Europe has a role to play. I think we can see in the crisis in Ukraine, when it comes to push and shove, Europe has implemented policies quickly. I think if we treat the sustainable issue as an urgent one, then Europe could do better by implementing its own issues quicker. Okay, one or two things on a lighter or a different angle. Really, reforming sustainability issues is a matter of changing human behavior. It's not a matter of technology. The technology is here. And I like to look at also what some ancient sources have had to say on motivating human behavior. There's a story from the classics of Hercules, who was given 12 tasks. The interesting thing is, one of the tasks was to clean up the Augean stables, incredible mess created by large numbers of animals, and this was also time limited. He had to do the whole thing in one day. It's interesting, I've never heard of a modern superhero who was given the task of cleaning up a gigantic mess. But somehow the ancients were perhaps more practical than some of the moderns who just look at the physical side of things. But anyway, he was given this task of cleaning up this great pollution in one day. And he found a method to do it, which was by diverting nearby rivers to just clean it up. And I think the message of this story is that we have to use existing forces to existing tools to solve problems. We can't, we don't have to develop something new and amazing. Sometimes we just have to use what we already have to better effect. Have I still got another few minutes, or am I running?
Yeah, you are running a bit, but it's a couple of minutes.
Okay, so another couple of minutes. I'm coming to the end as it was. I recently run through some old books and whatever, and I came across the Communist Manifesto, and I thought that's interesting to see after 150 years how correct his analysis of the solution was. It was written by Marx and Engels. How correct his analysis was. How there's obviously some elements of his analysis were correct. The industrial processes were creating a class of, you could call them have-nots, people at the bottom of the rung who were being pushed to the bottom and just used as industrial tools to turn the clogs, basically dehumanized or whatever. The analysis of the problem is one thing. Obviously, the solutions he suggested that somehow a communist party would solve all of this were hopelessly ineffective. And I think there is a lesson to be learned from all of that. It's not enough to just analyze problems and see what they are, and then suggest, okay, the solution is this, build this, that, or the other. You have to make sure that the solution is well thought out, well developed, well built, so that you do not just create something which is going to cause more problems. I think one of the reasons that alternative solutions that have been suggested have not been implemented is because maybe they have not been thought out to the end. So I think we have to think very well about the solutions that we propose, and not just say, okay, there is that problem and that problem, okay, take this. We have to think well about the solutions. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. It was really very interesting. And then also thanks for putting us in the middle of our reality and also giving some reference to our current situation and what we can take from this current situation also to make some step forward. That was absolutely great. So it has been a really interesting first round. And then I will invite all the speakers probably to join. We can add a new chair on this side, and then we are going also to open the discussion. I don't know if you want to start from this last point, because I think the point is testing the solution. If we think we have solution, testing the solution and realize if they are actually solution or not, because in our story, actually, we have attempted to have a lot of solution, and in many cases they became a disaster larger than we would like to solve. But then I leave the floor to all of you, and then I will invite you to ask questions to our fantastic speaker. So we need someone opening the floor. Thank you so much.
Let's break the ice. So in this conversation about sustainability, there are two actors that usually are not present in the other conversations. One is future generations, and so who speaks for the future generations, and in which way we can take into consideration future generations. And the other actor recently emerged in some legal orders is nature itself, so rights of nature. And who represents nature? This is the other question. So we have two actors without representation, or with doubtful, at least, representation. So this is a little provocation for everybody.
So would the speaker want to start respond to the, or not, to start saying something of the provocation from Susanna?
Okay. Well, from my side, as ecologist, what I can say is, yes, it's true that we need to rethink justice. And obviously, justice is something that we build. But there are some examples of lawyer of a national park or something like that that is working. It's something, I think, completely new for justice. I think is one of the way, and you mentioned the other one that is next generation, and I know that there is a group of people studying law that thinks that justice for the Anthropocene exactly means three directions: justice for new generation, justice over the nation, and is exactly this, and the justice for, let's say, nature, but means both species, so we care about the extinction of species, because, from my side is exactly one of the way we have to follow. But then I suppose, as ecologist, I wait that you write something, a good story for this, and to follow.
Thanks, Emilio. So what about the next generation?
I think there is a common element in the questions made by Susanna. I'm speaking as a lawyer, namely the fact that both future generations and nature are not typical subjects of law. Nature for not having a human characterization, and future generation because they don't exist. So I think that from a legal point of view, they could be interpreted as a sort of metaphor, or better, as a sort of parameters to interpret the current subjective situation of legal actors. Concerning future generation, we may say that the reference to future generation is a way to say we have to consider the diachronic perspective, the fact that there is time flowing, and we have to consider the effect on a long term of current actions. If you, strictly speaking, consider future generation as possible subjects, it would lead to the paradox to say when a child born, the result is that it is not future generation. He loses its characteristics. Or when he arrives at 18 years old, he loses the characteristics. It would be no sense. So the idea is that a sort of metaphor to indicate the necessity to consider long-term effect of current action, in the idea that humanity should remain existent on the earth. Considering nature, the discourse is quite different in the sense that we may consider the element of nature as legal values, and the problem of which legal standing for nature could be related to humans more strictly close to nature. For instance, indigenous population or rural community. And I think this is a way to give legal meaning to a standing for nature. The fact that we have to consider human realities which are closer to the ecosystem logic characterizing the earth. This is my little point.
Okay. Actually, the subject of future generations is at the heart also of the calculations of the externalities of carbon, or at least one of the approaches. There are two methods of calculating this. The one which was used in the documents used by the Environmental Protection Agency in America about 5-6 years ago, now, it's based on a certain calculation of how much damage the emission of 1 ton or whatever of carbon dioxide will cause to human activities. There's no way of quantifying the damage to natural systems. This is a matter of value, but even to human activities, there is an economic cost to the emissions. So the method used is to calculate or simulate the damage which will be caused in the future. And then this is a really problematical element. The damage is hundreds of depends also how, but it's certainly probably in the 500 euros per ton. And this is a value which nobody could pay. So the method which is used is discounting. We say things which are far in the future people care about less. Hence, if we discount the cost even by, say, 3% a year, cumulatively, this leads to a much lower value now. And this is how one can get to values of $50 or euros or relatively low values, is based on the discounting of the future generations explicitly. So this is at the heart of one of the issues. Actually, the approach adopted by the company CE Delft in Europe is based on the cost of pushing consumers to alternative systems, which is much more sensible as a method. I will say that the principle of looking after future generations has been recognized for 30 years. This principle was included in the Rio Declaration on the environment in 1992 as one of the core things which had to be addressed to preserve, when calculating the economics, that future damage should be considered the same as current damage. As well as this, one of the principles is that damage in another country should be considered the same as a damage in this country, and not to discount the lives and the values of people in other countries. So these principles are fundamental to resolving global change. I would bring reference also to a very important thinker, Immanuel Kant, who wrote about 200 years ago. He had this dream of world peace, and it was based on a federation of republics which would work by common principles, common values. And he wrote a list of principles which should be adopted by all of them in order to bring about peace. One of the principles was, some of the principles involved military matters, some of them involved the economic matters, that countries shouldn't get to a position where they had economic hegemony, because this would lead to political hegemony as well. And I think his model of how to build world peace is valid today, obviously with some adaptations and some adjustments based on the present situation. And I think sustainability should be something which would be implemented in any current model of this sort. The countries should recognize, not just in declarations as with the Rio Declaration, but implement in law the requirement that all economic activity should be adjusted to preserve the world that it is. I mean, we can't ask the future generations what they want, but it's we can understand even without asking them. They don't want to be burned in hell, and they don't want to have all the natural world destroyed. So I think we have to implement these things in law, and I think we know how to do it. It's not rocket science, and I think that is the way forward.
Thank you so much. I think that Francesca wanted to say something.
Just a follow-up to what we were saying now. I also agree that in the way we calculate the cost of carbon emissions, actually we can take into account the value of or the rights of future generations, because we can also, if we consider the studies on the cost of carbon emissions and we take the long run costs, when actually normally they actually split between the short run and the long run cost. The long run is much higher, and but if we look at the policies adopted in the European Union, they actually choose a kind of average value which is much lower than the long run cost. So of course there we are going to actually undermine the rights of future generations. Concerning the right, in general, the nature and the rights of nature, I wanted to bring an example which is now very, very close to our interests. For example, now we are talking so much about the offshore wind energy. And there is an issue that in my mind is very, very important to take into account. So we are not really considering the value of nature and the impact of these offshore wind energy projects on biodiversity in the marine space. And in this case, for example, this is a different topic, so it's about environmental impact assessment of these kind of projects, which are, of course, needed because we want to achieve sustainability. But there, we don't know exactly what will be the impact of all these wind farms in the marine space. And the problem is also that there are no data on the impact on biodiversity, because biodiversity in the marine space is not so much investigated. So there, how can we, for example, protect more nature? The only thing that comes to my mind is to use more the precautionary principle, because we need to actually adjust the solutions that we take to the fact that we are actually working, we are building in uncertain spaces, so we don't know exactly what will be the impact in the future. So there, if we really want to protect nature, then we need to adopt more the precautionary principle when we grant permits or we decide whether to do or not a project. But I would say that the answer to that question is a very global issue, but we need to find very small solutions in very specific cases. So I would say that's the answer.
So much, Francesca. I think there was an additional question. Thank you so much.
Sorry, not a question. I wanted to react as well to Susanna's
That's perfectly fine.
provocative question, rather. Since there are quite a few lawyers here, I wonder why we haven't mentioned so far the law cases before courts, not only in the Netherlands, in particular in the USA, claiming reference very often, even in the USA, to the Paris Agreement, and having success with stakeholders, civil society, pushing for next generation protection of nature. I think this is a case where these two elements are being used in a positive way. If you go back to Montesquieu, the courts, the judiciary are very important, and I think there is a way, even without agreement between nations, to have already a first push into the more environmental friendly way of governing. And this is often against the federal or national institutions, and very successful at the moment. This is a tendency which I think is striking, particularly in the USA, where they are not part of the COP at the moment, and particularly with Trump and Biden has moved very much either. So I think there is a new way for bottom-up young people as well to bring in their concerns for the next generation, to protect nature, and to overcome this idea that we are the center of all nature with our Anthropocene here. I think there's a way to, in concrete terms, to have some success for the legal approach there. Thank you.
We can collect a few questions, and then we leave the floor to the panelists to answer.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for your presentations. Some gave me some food for thought. For example, the example of Hercules, that was something I hadn't come across before. So we're discussing democratic models for sustainability, and I was thinking, you know, democratic models implies that there are people involved in this. And something that I have recently come across is actually the concept that usually climate change is portrayed as an environmental issue. But actually, it's a human issue. It's not the environment that created the issue, it's the people. And so the question is, if we accept the fact that people are the cause of climate change, it means that inevitably they could also be the solution to climate change. And so, talking to you, about models of democratic models for sustainability, the question is, in law, how can we organize our societies to provide solutions? If we are the cause, and then we can be the solution, what can law do apart from the carbon taxations, for example, to actually enable or empower people to actually be proactive about mitigating climate change? Thank you.
Yes, I had a question. I think part of the debate was a question of what is the role of soft law and hard law. And of course, I would like to return to that, even though I'm not an expert in that issue, obviously. But the point is, externalities, generally speaking, you tended to present as negative. But I was thinking of, from an environmental point of view, and again, I'm not an expert, of trade agreements, for example, passed by the European Union, or being negotiated, for example, with Mercosur. We do have externality as a power tool from the point of view of the European Union, in as much as the way we negotiate trade agreements, we can, for example, add conditions. When we discuss on the future of our forests, or global forests, or forests in Brazil, this could, of course, be part of a trade agreement, in which case we would take a hard stance. It's a big issue. And we could assume, or maybe we should, this positive dimension of what is often called the Brussels effect. So it's a very complicated issue, but I wanted to put it to you, since you are the experts, and I'm very much, of course, attracted to this issue of a positive use of externalities by means of possibly hard law, when there are power politics at stake. It's a big issue.
Someone else? You? No? No? Next time? Tomorrow? Someone else from the floor? Any question, issue? No. Okay. Thank you, doesn't want. No.
So the panelists can start answering, and also I will ask if in your answer you can also put in mind something that is in the title of our session, that is conversation among between science and social and natural scientists. That is part that we have had in the discussion. So in answering, also keeping in mind which we can take from the title, and how can we can merge in our reply a communication among these different components. So the floor is yours. Please. Try to give short reply so we can have an additional round, because I would like to close not later than 6:15, and then we have from 15 to half an hour maximum.
Okay, I'll try and get to the point. It was said here that we as humans have caused this problem. Humans have been around a long time without global warming. The real problem is that technology and industry has advanced far beyond, at a far faster pace than our governmental and regulatory structures. The Industrial Revolution in particular, and the expansion of industry to the four corners of the world, the extractions of fossil fuels, these are the drivers of climate change. And the problem is that technology has advanced fast. Our regulatory structures are still not much different than they were 200 years ago. This is a problem not just in the environment, it's also in economics. Now you have multinational companies that can play local governments round their fingers, and the only solution to this is that government has to step up the pace and develop and fill in the gaps. Also the problem of nuclear weapons. You have nuclear weapons, also technology which is advanced without the regulatory structures. So we need the regulatory structures, and One thing which is not that difficult is to implement in law the Rio Declaration. The principles that are needed are known. This has to be implemented in law with slight adjustments by the various companies and countries, and that is the most important thing.
Francesca or Francesco want to?
Yeah, actually, I first wanted to respond to the first question on the on how the law can actually enable people to participate in this global challenge, and I think we need to. Now I have this, maybe I am a bit biased from the economic theory of rational agents and the fact that the people, in any case, when we take decisions, we try to maximize our utility from our behaviors. But the utility is not just about monetary things. Of course, we want to maximize our profit, but utility is also related to non-monetary things. So there are also non-monetary values. And there is a kind of underpinning. So we can take rational decisions if we know, if we are aware of things. But how much are we aware, really, of the state of the environment, on how the ecosystems work, and what is the impact of our actions, what is the impact of our of the things that we buy? We are not aware. So how we can then take rational decisions on that? How are we really maximizing our utility if we don't know the impact on nature? So I would say the first thing we need to work on is on the citizen awareness of the environment. And of course, this means to work on education. So the education of people. So we need to learn how the environment works. And this is something that probably is, of course, should be done by scientists, but the responsibility of lawyers is also to create the best way to channel, so to convey this science to the citizens. And there are also studies, for example, on how to solve environmental conflicts. So, for example, I don't know, the conflict between the people and the wolves, just to mention something. And the first step is always to inform the people. People need to know what is the function of the wolf, for example, in the ecosystem before they kill wolves, and then they don't know what is the next scenario. So I would say this is the one idea, one possible idea. And then maybe Francesco wants to reply. Yeah.
No, I believe short. Okay. And then I don't believe. No, I wanted to link to some a wrap up regarding soft law, but also the question of Livia. So what we are doing now for next generation? For me, the leitmotif today. And I admitted European law is my subject, and I have to say. So is what European law, and Geoffrey gave me also helped me with that, is we always underestimate what the European Union is doing in environmental matters. So can be soft law, can be hard law. European Union actually last year was one of the peak of the environmental action of the European law. Okay, Next Generation EU, we all know what is about, but what is less known to the public is the Fit for 55 packages, no? 12 action, among them there is the CBAM, not the carbon adjustment mechanism. And also, for instance, we have to really look at the taxonomy regulations, no? 2020 taxonomy regulation and the delegated act. I think EU is doing a lot, but the problem is that, as Professor explained, that in the past the European countries draw the lines of Africa, Asia. I think now the core, the pragmatic answer to climate change has to come from Europe. It has to come from Europe. Like, we're talking about supranational, but we need to start from a pragmatical aspect. And I think we need to start from Europe again, where that can play a role of the Brussels effect, no? Anu Bradford, no? That is the book. But the problem is that how we convince the others to come and to play the part that the European Union wants to do. Or that's, I don't know, because when they tried, and we know the Canadian and US aviation case, no? That they want to include all the aviation in the ETS system, they opposed. Or the Inuit case, I don't know if someone remember the Inuit case, no? So everything that is produced and goes to the internal market has to comply with the environmental standard. The problem is that it's not easy to convince the others to comply. And we know that, for instance, at the COP26, we cannot convince the Indians, no, to follow our standard because they postponed the climate neutral standard at 2060 or 75. So the question is how EU, as an example now, and not anymore as the Europe of 200 years ago, can convince the other to be on board. That's, I don't know, it's behind my knowledge. And thank you, Geoffrey, for the example of Europe, because within Europe, we always underestimate how much Europe is doing now. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to say something more. First of all, related to the question of Wolfgang, I don't know exactly the jurisprudence, the case law of the United States concerning the point of climate change, but in general terms, in recent years, there are many legal actions related to the sort of climate justice, the fact that there will be a sort of human rights to climate equilibrium. I think that this is a possible path, legal path, depending on the concrete situation of each legal system, of course, but the problem of a pure human right approach is that the whole system of human rights is based on an individual approach, a sort of sum of individual rights. Conversely, the environment is a system reality. The idea of ecosystem is the idea of a relation between many subjects, also many humans. So, strictly speaking, the same structure of human rights doesn't fit well with ecological approach. This is the best. So, it's a possible path, of course, but at the condition to interpret human rights according to a collective dimension. Human rights, from the beginning, from Illuminism, was created according to the dichotomy, state and individual, by destroying intermediated corporation, the intermediated portion, intermediated body. This is a problem of today law. It is a problem of indigenous population, which is not state, is not individual, it's a problem of local community. My opinion is that to address correctly the problem of ecological protection should be to give more power to local community strictly related to ecological problem and specific ecosystems. Of course, according to a global strategy, saying which are target, which are thresholds, which are earth equilibrium. This would be, in my opinion, the good perspective, as I tried to said. And this is also a way to answer to Alberto's suggestion to refer to conversation between social and natural science. In my opinion, the ecological model could be also a legal model, according to the concrete base of the idea of ecosystem. This is my point. Concerning the question on trade agreements, perhaps it could be a solution, but you should consider that usually trade agreements have just one aim, which is to liberalize trade. That's a good aim, but not, strictly speaking, related to environmental protection. If you take WTO law, you don't find an obligation for state to protect the environment. You may try, you may find just some exceptions, perhaps created by fortunately, by jurisprudence concerning consideration from an interpretative point of view of environmental values, but just from a negative point of view, not saying you, state, are obliged to protect the environment. So, of course, there are some examples of free trade agreements considering also sort of environmental obligation in terms not to worsen the situation related to a sort of a principle of non-regression, which is burning, perhaps, legal principle, which is still discussed. But in general terms, it's very difficult to find a way to direct protect the environment from trade agreements. This is my point. And lastly, the possible solution is conversely, and I try to say this, to find legal standing for humans, for collectives, reality, to effectively give solutions having ecological character. So a sort of cooperation, a sort of alliance between experts, technicians, lawyers, ecologists, and local population within each sovereign legal systems, trying to find within each sovereign legal system the way to highlight and to protect this kind of values. This is my suggestion.
If I may add something on what Saverio said about the treaties, and speaking from the fashion industry perspective, in the early 2000s, when the multi-fiber agreement, which was a trade agreement, was adopted, it marked basically the beginning of the end, and it allowed for the development of fast fashion and for the offshoring phenomenon that has been partially counteracted during the pandemic with the onshoring, but is now spreading again. So from my sector perspective, trade agreements are rather problematic and not really the solution to the problem. And also the human rights treaty, business and human rights treaty, which has been discussed for decades probably, has never been adopted, and rather a soft law instrument, so the business and human rights principles have been adopted instead. But of course, as a soft law tool, there are also limits. And to answer to the last question regarding what people can do, again from a fashion industry perspective, well, a lot of emphasis has been put on individual action. So people, there are researches, like from a psychological perspective, finding that new Generation Z, X, Y, I lost track of how many letters there are, feel guilty sometimes when they buy clothes from fast fashion brands, but they don't know what else to buy. They feel lost among the wide variety of information. So a lot of emphasis is put on the individual, and this has also been used as an excuse by companies. So there is no demand, so we're not doing any effort, because nobody would buy sustainable clothes, so what's the point? So in my perspective, the individuals, so people are the solution, but are not the only player that should be considered. So we need collective actions. We need to bring together industry, governments at different levels, and also players that have been neglected so far. So nature, young generations, but also local communities, and also analyze and solve issues from a non-Western perspective. Because the whole sustainability discourse and even the sustainability definition itself is framed under a Western perspective, which is not necessarily the correct one.
Thank you so much. So we are almost half an hour late, but I think that we need to give the very final messages from the panelists. You have just 1 minute each to give your bullet point as a final.
We have 2 minutes because we are...
You have 2 minutes because you are two. Okay, that is fine. Don't lose seconds. Start with your 2 minutes.
Okay, so very quickly, actually, we just wanted to show how soft law can be used to actually achieve sustainability, and we actually show how there are economic arguments to support the use of soft law, but from a legal point of view, we still have challenges to tackle. So that's...
The point is that when you soft law can be an instrument of supranational legal global perspective, so it can be an instrument to achieve some goals, but it posed by from a legal perspective some legal problems according to EU law and also constitutional law. However, the approach should be wider than only just law. But if it's possible, then more soft law will be better. Okay.
Thank you so much. Emilio.
Yeah, from just some bullet point from an ecological point of view, I think we need to keep in mind that ecological systems are linked one with the other. What happens in a country may have a consequence very far. We have a wildfire in Borneo that bring a spillover, a pandemic spillover in Malaysia or something like that. And there are a lot of examples in ecology about this. This is one point. The other point, just trying also to answer a little to externalities and taking account of the externality in our system, is thinking that limits can be also an opportunity, not only a problem, but also an opportunity. And this may change a little the mind.
Okay. I would like to emphasize, I think it is true that Europe is doing a lot. It's to the credit of Europe and the issue of sustainability. Maybe it's also because Europe has more resources, also because European votes are more interested in the matter. Another point I would add is that the war in Ukraine, which is basically a war against the West, is bringing a lot of countries together. It's basically the West against Russia and Belarus. I think we need on the global stage a new institute, a union between the free world, which should include principles also of sustainability and at the core.
Thank you so much. You and Sarah.
Thank you. So for me, a key issue that emerged from my research is that we have to stop working in silos. So we have to start cooperating, start cross-sector cooperations and bring together on the same table scientists, lawyers, and linguists, whatever. So start cross-sector cooperation in order to reach effective solutions. So this table is probably one of the trials, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Saverio.
Okay. My point is that there is no natural law, fortunately or unfortunately. The law is based on effectivity, and the law is based on society. The law is based on what people think, what people believe. So if you want to affirm an ecological perspective, first of all, we have to believe in that value. We have to communicate that value. We have to cooperate among a society. This is the only way to affirm our value, and I think that this conference is a little thick, a little way in this direction. Thank you. Little, but very important, of course.
So thank you so much to our panelists. I hope that you will find as interesting as I found this discussion. Really, really great. Thank you again for all of you who are attending, and then I will say Thanks a lot to the panelists. And we can close now this section. Thank you.
Just a few practical information. See all of you, if you want to join this evening, starting from 8 p.m. at Susu Maniello Winery, which is just behind Teatro Verdi, in the middle of the city center. And so, see you there. Thank you for being here.